Ethan Lancaster had it all: money, power, and a reputation as the city's most eligible bachelor. So when he suddenly announced his engagement to Claire Sutton, a woman society mocked for being overweight and unattractive, everyone was in shock. But what they didn't know was the cruel truth behind it all. Claire wasn't the love of his life. She was a bet, a joke between Ethan and his arrogant friends. He had played his part perfectly, luring her in, making her believe in a fairy tale romance, only to shatter her heart on their wedding night. But just when he thought he had won, Claire did something unexpected. Because this time, the one who would walk away humiliated was him. The grand hall was filled with the scent of fresh roses, the sound of soft classical music playing in the background, and the murmur of guests who could barely contain their whispers. Tonight was a spectacle, one that no one had seen coming. Ethan Lancaster, the young, handsome, and incredibly wealthy businessman, was getting married. But it wasn't to a stunning model or a woman from a prestigious family. No, Ethan was marrying Claire Sutton, a woman society had long overlooked. Claire was overweight, with a round face and thick glasses that constantly slipped down her nose. Her dress, though elegant, struggled to fit her wide frame, and her makeup did little to hide the nervous expression she wore. The guests stared in disbelief, some in shock, others suppressing laughter. How could Ethan, the most eligible bachelor in the city, end up with someone like her? The truth was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. It all started as a drunken bet between Ethan and his equally wealthy and arrogant friends. They were at an elite private club one evening when the conversation took a cruel turn. "Women are all the same," Ethan had scoffed. "They only want money and status. I could marry the least attractive woman in this city, and she'd still worship the ground I walk on." His friend Oliver smirked and leaned forward. "Is that so? Then prove it." The others laughed, raising their glasses. "Yeah, Ethan, let's see you put your money where your mouth is." Ethan, always one for a challenge, smirked. "Fine. I'll marry the first woman we find who's the complete opposite of what I'd go for." That's when they saw Claire sitting alone at a coffee shop, reading a book. She was everything society deemed unattractive, the perfect candidate for their cruel game. Ethan approached her with charm, pretending to be mesmerized by her intelligence and kindness. At first, Claire was hesitant, but as the days passed, she couldn't believe a man like Ethan had taken an interest in her. No one had ever looked at her that way before. She fell fast, unaware of the true reason behind his affection. Now, as they stood at the altar, Claire looked up at him with pure love in her eyes. Ethan, on the other hand, masked his amusement behind a perfect smile. He knew the real fun would begin tonight, the wedding night. His friends had made it clear that the final part of the bet would be to record Claire's reaction when he revealed the truth. But as the night unfolded, nothing went as he expected. Claire sat nervously in the lavish honeymoon suite, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her dress. She had never been this close to a man before, much less someone like Ethan. The idea of intimacy terrified her, but she was willing to give her heart to him fully. Ethan walked in, loosening his tie, his smirk barely hidden. "So, Mrs. Lancaster," he said smoothly, "I bet you never thought a man like me would end up with you." Claire chuckled shyly, looking away. "To be honest, no, I didn't." He poured himself a drink, watching her through narrowed eyes. "And tell me, Claire, what exactly do you love about me?" She looked up, confused. "What do you mean? Is it the money? The lifestyle?" He took a sip, his tone almost mocking. "Or did you actually believe this was real?" Claire's smile faltered. "Ethan, what are you saying?" He set his glass down and pulled out his phone, tapping on the screen. Within seconds, a voice recording played the conversation from the club. His voice, his friend's laughter, the cruel bet. Her face turned pale as she listened to the words that cut through her heart like a blade. "I could marry the least attractive woman in this city, and she'd still worship the ground I walk on. "This was never real, Claire," Ethan said, his voice cold. "You were just a joke. A game. A bet I won." For a moment, there was only silence. Then Claire did something Ethan didn't expect. She smiled. Not a smile of heartbreak or humiliation, but something else entirely. "Ethan," she said softly, "I already knew." His smirk faded. "What?" Claire stood up, her confidence radiating in a way he had never seen before. "I overheard you that night at the club. I knew exactly what you were doing from the moment you approached me." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Then why did you go along with it?" Claire stepped closer, her eyes locked onto his. "Because I wanted to see how far you would take it. I wanted to see if you had even the slightest chance of redemption." Ethan swallowed, suddenly feeling like he had lost control of the situation. "And," Claire sighed, shaking her head, "you failed." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it on the table. "I signed the annulment papers this morning. Our marriage is over before it even began." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're just going to walk away?" Claire smiled again, but this time, there was a glint of victory in her eyes. "No, Ethan. You are." At that moment, the hotel doors swung open and two men in suits entered. Ethan recognized them instantly, Claire's lawyers. "As of tonight, you have no access to the Lancaster family estate," one of them said, placing more documents in front of him. "Your father's assets, which you were set to inherit, have been transferred to Claire under a private agreement." Ethan's heart pounded. "What?" Claire crossed her arms. "You see, Ethan, I may not have the looks you and your shallow friends value, but I do have intelligence. Before your father passed, he made a deal with my family. If I married you, even for one day, I would gain control of all his assets." Ethan's face turned red with fury. "You played me?" Claire leaned in, her voice like ice. "No, Ethan. I beat you at your own game." By the next morning, the news had spread like wildfire. Ethan Lancaster, the arrogant playboy millionaire, had lost everything overnight. His friends abandoned him, the media mocked him, and the people he once controlled with money no longer cared about his existence. Meanwhile, Claire, once the woman no one noticed, was now one of the wealthiest and most influential figures in the city. But more than that, she had proven something important. True worth isn't defined by looks or social status. As she walked out of the hotel, leaving Ethan in stunned silence, she took a deep breath. For the first time in her life, Claire felt truly beautiful. Not because of how she looked, but because she had finally won.